Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to this Sea Trade Maritime virtual conference sponsored by the Isle of Man Ship Registry. To introduce our panel and guide us through the next 60 minutes of discussion, please welcome your moderator for this session, Director of Prospect Maritime and Training Specialist at Clarkson Platou, Dr. Malcolm Willingale.
Great. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon and evening, depending where you are in the world. I hope everyone is safe and well. As said, my name is Malcolm Willingale and I'll be moderating this important session today. Before I introduce, the views of our panel members, I will spend a couple of minutes just setting the scene, if I may. Today's topic for discussion, people sustainability, is of course a very important one. For while a lot of attention is focused on the other two pillars of sustainability, obviously the environment and the challenged economic situation across the world at the moment, it's all too easy to overlook people as a third pillar. The stresses and strain on people working in our industry, both ashore and particularly afloat, caused by COVID-19 pandemic, have been immense and far-reaching. It's also true to say that the onset of the pandemic hit our industry, like many other industries, at a time of considerable change and uncertainty, particularly with regard to the ongoing transition to new digital ways of working, which we'll no doubt touch on, and the need to determine and implement decarbonisation strategies to help alleviate the impact of climate change, which other sessions at this conference have dealt with. From a personal standpoint, I've experienced many highs and lows and challenges during my 40 plus years of working in shipping. I recall in particular the fallout from the 2008 global financial crash quite vividly. There have been times of high anxiety when things have gone wrong, sometimes horribly so. While these times have never involved life and death situations, merely loss of financial position or reputation, I've benefited, particularly during my time in ship management, by working with colleagues having to deal with severe pressure. I have therefore developed a healthy respect for the guys on the front line, so to speak, the seafarers and the office-based operations staff in ship owning and ship management companies who support them. It's helpful at the outset, if I may, just a table of some key metrics which illustrate the magnitude of the current disruption and pose a threat to sustainability. So a recent review of the Maritime Press Highlights, for example, show that an estimated 400,000 seafarers, approximately 1 in 4, are reportedly caught up in the crew relief disruption. A recent study by the Norwegian Hull Club, I think called Refresh, suggests that about 23% of the industry respondents are suffering from some sort of depression and nearly 10% anxiety. Over 50% of respondents to another study by the UK Chamber of Shipping, Lloyd's Register, Safety at Sea and the Mission to Seafarers believe that the respondents don't believe that they're receiving sufficient support for health and safety problems. And last but not least, I read, I think yesterday, that the Mission to Seafarers helpline has received over 1,500 calls from seafarers about coronavirus-related issues. So today's panelists have clearly got a lot to get their teeth into. We are thankful, therefore, to have at our disposal a team of experienced practitioners, willing and able to share their insights and expertise. Without wishing to overstep the mark and upset people at the outset, I would estimate that between the panel today, there's pushing something like 150 years of experience. So there's a lot of experience to draw on. Moreover, they represent a leading ship owner and a leading ship manager, a major flag state, a major provider of training solutions for seafarers, and one of the leading charities which supports the global maritime industry. So quite a diverse stakeholder group. To make the most of the precious time we have together, I would like to follow a fairly free-flowing format, if I may, prompted by a number of key questions. Some of these are reflections on the state of the industry from a people perspective. 9 months ago, when the pandemic was declared, how well prepared were we at the time? What has been done and not done to enable shipping to cope with the additional pressures, aside from the lack of recognition of seafarers as key workers, which I'm sure will come up? What lessons have we learned along the way, some by design, some by accident? What are the important issues which still need to be addressed as a priority? Perhaps we can derive even greater benefit from technology and innovation in training and career development. Hopefully so. While the focus is on sea staff, what is the state of play regarding office-based staff, the majority of which I assume are still working remotely? And lastly, what are our collective thoughts about the future? How optimistic are we that we will learn lessons which will deliver benefit in the years to come? In addition to these questions, we welcome the questions and comments from participants. That we've had a huge response, a lot of registrations to this webinar today. So please feel free to use the Q&A button and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can, time permitting. Okay, so to kick things off, I will ask each panel member in turn to share some opening thoughts. Now, bios for each speaker are available via the webinar, and hopefully during this initial sort of download, we can flush out some of the key issues which we will encourage a deeper dive on. So to kick things off, I'd just like to ask each of the panel members in turn, starting with you, Matt, if I may, as a head of health safety issues and quality issues at V-Ships, one of the largest ship managers, independent ship managers in the world. What are your initial thoughts on people sustainability? Matt.
My role is to ensure that our 3,000 shore colleagues operating in 60 offices in 30 countries go home safe at the end of each day, and for our 44,000 seafarers to go home safe at the end of their contracts. With COVID-19 and with the majority of our office colleagues working remotely, and with still around about 1,000 overdue crew reliefs, my role has just got more challenging. However, we have good people, systems and processes to manage our way through this difficult time, and I appreciate that all of you on this call have the same challenges. As an industry, we're in it together and we're all in the same boat, and hopefully today we can share our learnings in order to keep our colleagues and our vessels safe and our business viable. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Matt. Andy, could I turn to you next? Because as a regional director for Middle East and South Asia for Mission to Seafarers, I mean, prior to COVID coming along, I mean, yours was a challenging role within the industry. So what are some of the key points that you'd like to highlight and maybe explore further during this session? Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. I mean, we run a whole series of different welfare services, and typically, I guess, pre-COVID, I have the people on our caseload requiring some sort of specific support. Now, we're perhaps unique in that we're 100% focused just on the people. We're absolutely focused on welfare and the training that's needed to support that welfare. I'm concerned that already our caseload has gone up to averaging around 200 seafarers requiring some sort of support across that region from Egypt to India. But I'm also concerned about professionally about the lag that will come with the well-being of seafarers. You know, many seafarers going on to double contracts, being away from home for even more extended periods of time, suffering even more isolation, already reports of more depression, more difficulties for seafarers. And it seems to me that it will be 6 months or 12 months from now, we may see the real impact of COVID within our industry. So I'm concerned to dig a bit into that and to help us think about how we might prepare for that now.
Fabulous points, Andy. I'm sure we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Raul, could I turn to you next as Group Creative Director at Ocean Technologies, which is probably the biggest provider of seafarer training solutions and development solutions. I guess you were pretty well prepared, given that a lot of your services now are delivered online, but perhaps you could share with us a few thoughts about the general topic of people sustainability. Raul, the floor's yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so coming from Ocean Technologies Group, so we have the Videotel, Seagull, Marlins, and the MTS Marine Train Services brands, which are all obviously involved in the training and development from an e-learning perspective. So you're right. For us, the disruption was really very minimal in the sense we were remote first businesses. But I think looking at this particular issue, it's worth, for us, it was something that we got on very early because the seafarer is our key stakeholder, not our customer necessarily, direct customer, but certainly our success is entirely dependent on them. And consequently, we reach out to organisations like the charities that you've mentioned already to make sure that those topics are on our radar. And it's worth noting that we had already seen this as a major issue as an industry, the seafarer mental health and well-being. And it's a good job that we had when this hit, because we were at least in a position to have resources available. So across our brands, we had things like, specifically on mental health and well-being, which we made with many of the charities and some of the people's organisations here today, but then also things that were inspired by the Shell Resilience Programme, titles specifically around that. So there were sort of things available on the ships at that time to be able to do it. But I think looking beyond that and what we need to do beyond that, I think the debate is really shifting to look at some of these things more in the round. So rather than sort of parking seafarer mental health and well-being over here, it's the recognition that exists within the whole working environment on board the ship and what you do. And so for that kind of brings in, for me, lots of things around healthy living itself, catering, eating, all those sorts of things, stress, fatigue management, bullying, harassment, and cultural sort of conflict issues, which again were on people's radar. But I think this will bring it into really sharp focus now, that we have to take a much more proactive, more sort of traditional HR, I think, view of the person in the round and how we go about supporting those. Because I think as this goes on, we're going to see that everyone will be tested by this. I think if you look even in the extreme privileged position that we're in, working in the office ashore and still being with family and all those things, there's still this disruption, this fatigue is still having an impact on people's mental health there. So I think really looking across the board at everything we can do to support individuals is where we'll end up with this, I think.
Okay, so a more holistic approach in the future. Okay, we'll no doubt come back to that as well. Could I turn to Toby next? Toby, your perspective as Deputy Director of the Isle of Man Ship Register, today's sponsors. Over to you. Toby, we're having difficulty connecting with the Isle of Man. So, Anwar, could we then trip over to Kuwait? Anwar Buftain is team leader in the Fleet Personnel Group at KOTC, owner, I think I'm right in saying, I checked the fleet list the other day, of some 30 crude up to VLCC products and LPG carriers. So some initial thoughts from you, Anwar, if I may.
Dr. Malcolm, very good afternoon or good morning from your end. Actually, I'd like to share with you today the challenges for the seafarer during the COVID-19 pandemics, and basically what the suffered has been taking place, such as physical or mental exhaustion caused by experiencing long-term and fatigue due to the certain issues such as concern of their family welfare while they are away, overstaying on board, lack of relief in time, concerns of the safety and the security of their family at home, Also, overthinking, which is minor issue, became a major. We have prepared a contingency program, which is we shared among the shipping industry within the region, and we were eventually meeting quite regular to standardize the precautionary measures and how to overcome these challenges during this period. And we have divided these challenges into two, which is we call personnel challenges and also operational challenges. I would like to, when the time comes to me, I'll go through the what personnel challenges has been defined and how it been overcome. Also the same, we have defined the operational challenges and how to be overcome during these exercise, which is we did during the peak. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to explore that. So thanks very much. Is Toby connected at the moment? Toby, are you there? Sounds as if we're still having problems. Okay. I want to pick up on one of the themes that have been sort of unearthed so far. And I think it's fair to describe shipping and ship management as a problem-intensive business. It's not a business where if you're looking for a career which is very predictable, 9 to 5, it's all very smooth sailing, whether you're ashore or afloat. We face many risks which require a very disciplined and diligent approach, working on a 24/7, 365 basis. So looking back to the start of the COVID disruption, and we've already touched on this to a certain extent, was our industry in a good position with regard to health and safety and well-being of sea staff at that time? Andy, could you kick off on that one, please? Because take a general view. In your opinion, when the pandemic struck, was the industry, did it have the systems, the approaches, the mindset to deal with the pandemic?
So from my perspective across the Middle East and into South Asia, I think we were beginning to be prepared. So, there was a lot of draft or initial piloted and digital technologies going on. So I know from our own side at Mission to Seafarers, we run an application on a smartphone that sort of monitors seafarers' happiness, but its coverage is relatively limited. So therefore, it gives us some indication. I think we were prepared because we were thinking a bit about how do we build capacity for people in a different era. How do we begin training families or working with families as well as the individual seafarers? So I don't think we were entirely prepared, but I think enough of the groundwork had been done that it's meant that many organizations have been able to scale up very rapidly. So it seems to me that we've begun to scale up, and I think that the next task will be how do we really embed some of those things so that we don't just return to some sort of normal once we've all been vaccinated or whatever against coronavirus.
Okay. Matt, could I bring you in now? Because you said earlier before the live event that you hadn't been in the office for 9 months and you're relying on remote working, as I'm sure most colleagues are. So again, looking back to March, I think it was March the 12th, the official declaration. What sort of shape do you think, there was always ongoing problems, always ongoing challenges, but in general, do you think the ship management sector was pretty well prepared?
Malcolm, further to Andy's
Be honest,
response.
Matt. Be honest, Matt.
Well, the answer is no, we were not fully ready, but we've adapted quickly. We were as an industry moving slowly towards more digitization. However, the pandemic has accelerated that movement where most crew documentation is done remotely. We've got remote crew conferences are the new norm now. Remote audits of our offices and vessel inspections are all being remote and virtual, and these have been developed. So as an industry, no, we were not ready, in my view, but we've adapted quickly because we had to. We're responsible for people's lives, the environment, and we are resilient as an industry. So this has probably accelerated our collective approach to keeping our ships and colleagues safe and our business viable, as I mentioned earlier.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. We'll no doubt come back to that as well. Toby, I think you're connected now. So perhaps if you could give your perspective from a flag state. I mean, when the pandemic was declared, what sort of shape was the flag state business in? Are you there, Toby? Okay. 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 I think there's a delay. Toby, can you hear me? Can you raise your hand? Gesticulate? Seems to still be a problem connecting. So I'll move on and then come back. Could I sort of move on perhaps to what actions, the key actions that have been done, and perhaps some of those things that are still to be done by the different industry stakeholders to alleviate the stresses and strains which lead to people burnout. So, Anwar, you mentioned earlier that there was a load of challenges and you've done a load of things to try and sort of address these issues. So perhaps you could briefly run through some of the key activities that KOTC have implemented in recent months. Anwar.
Yeah, hi. Well, basically, when I come to the challenges we have defined, as we said, there's a personal challenges and operational challenges. I should go through what is the personal challenges we have faced, such as crew concern due to the fatigue,
Sorry, Anwar, could you continue? Sorry.
Sorry there. Yes, when we talked about the crew challenges, we talked about the crew concerns, fatigues due to overdue crew reliefs. And these have been overcome, obviously, by reducing the working hours on board the vessel. We have enhanced the management team on board, monitoring and supporting all the crew members. A regular meeting on board to raise the morals, regular social gathering on board. Also, we have enhanced bonus payment to during the extended tour of duty on board. We have did extremely diverting the vessels. We have went through chartering flights through our colleagues' companies to ease the crew relief during that period. Sharing information regarding the crew change status worldwide with the fleet, which through, of course, several webinars, gave them the feeling that we are with them,
Okay.
we are supporting them. Also, there is other challenges which is faced. Basically, we talked about here, it is risk of COVID-19 infections during crew changes, shore personnel visit on board. And this was overcome by giving a detailed company procedure for COVID-19 crew change developed and implemented in line with IMO circular, as I remember, 4204, also with other related industry recommendations. Also, we mandatory quarantine prior joining the vessel in order to ensure the safety people on board. We have enforced it for the all joiners. Detailed company operational procedures for calling port and handling shore personnel attending the vessel. Basically, these type of challenges dealing with COVID suspected case on board, and that's one of the happen quite regular, that the company procedure have been developed to implement it, and that's basically through a regular drill carried on board the vessel, monitoring of crew body temperature, symptoms, and all these, which is to ensure the safety of the crew during that period. More challenges dealing with medical cases, actually, lack of possibility to attend a doctor show, emergency evacuations, and this was overcome by enhancing monitoring and medical advice for all cases by the company medical advisors, shore medical team visiting the vessel and arranging on several occasions. Also, coordination and support in organizing medical evacuation on medical grounds.
Okay.
The last challenge, which is we found there, which is we talk about, is seafarer concern about their family, health, and financial situation back at home due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. And we have overcome this issue by providing the seafarer with a high-speed internet 24/7 in order to enhance the communication. We have additional MPO, which is monthly payment order, has been permitted in order to support the family financially during that period. Also, the companies has offered an assistance to their family while they are on board. So this basically what is the personal challenges which is has been defined and been overcome during that peak of the pandemic stage.
Okay, well, thanks for that, outlining that portfolio of activities. Clearly, a lot of actions have been done and implemented in a very short space of time. Matt, could I ask you to maybe reflect on a couple of those? I mean, during this time of uncertainty, anxiety, and stress, I guess that efforts have been redoubled and then redoubled again to improve communications, to make sure that if the news is not good, at least there's some news about crew reliefs, trying to sort of improve coaching and mentoring perhaps of people under stress. I mean, what's been the view from V-Ships?
You're so correct, Malcolm. And one of the challenges that we faced at the beginning was, how do we manage this? You know, because we're in it for the long haul. And very quickly, we ensured we had a process where we were speaking, we were engaging with our ships on a weekly basis, not just from the fleet cells or from the offices, but from the CEO of the organization, the executive team. And more importantly, it's an engagement. It wasn't just a one-way street. This was more about listening to all the crew around a speaker, hearing their concerns, hearing about what we were doing to get them off on time or at the earliest opportunity. And more importantly, you know, we were giving them hope that we were doing everything that we can to get them home safely and to their families and loved ones. And this is where the industry united, Malcolm. You know, we were collaborating with other managers to coordinate flight, you know, booking seats, etc. This was a real combined effort. But so engagement with our ships and our seafarers, listening to them, but more importantly, following up. But giving them the tools, you know, such as physician advisory services, you know, qualified medics ashore who can hold their hands and guide them through any symptoms on board, putting rapid test kits on board, you know, again, with the physician advisory service. And again, going back to the mental well-being aspects, you know, we're not psychologists. We're ship managers, so we needed subject matter experts that can help, you know, our colleagues on board the ship and in the offices, you know, through an employee assistance program for counselling, and of course free of charge and confidential. And this was a dedicated team focusing on engagement. So engagement, listening, following up. And making sure that the seafarers felt that they had we had their backs covered. We were doing everything that we could to get them off in time, and we've made great strides forward, Malcolm. But however, let's not underestimate the significant impact on mental health and morale. And this is an industry which is focused on regulation and safety standards. This is impacting on safety. You know, when a seafarer is distracted, he's worried, he's on social media, this could impact on safety because he's distracted and he's thinking about other things rather than thinking about his ship, his colleagues. So through engagement and through the external professional support services, Malcolm, we're doing everything that we think we can, but if there's more to be done, you know, we're willing to hear about it so that we can support them further.
Okay, fine. Thanks for that, Matt. So even if there's bad news to say, at least people understand what the reality of the situation is. Toby, I think you're... Yeah. Sorry, Matt.
No, just as you say, managing expectations. If it's good news or bad news, it needs to be provided regardless.
Yeah.
Okay. Toby, I've just seen you blink, so I think you're connected. Would you like to sort of give your take on what lessons you think we've learnt over the last 9 months, particularly focusing on the use of remote surveys, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, I'm playing a bit of catch up, so apologies to everybody. We've had connection problems. I think it's government protocols we suffer our end, but I've missed. So catching up a bit. Yeah, the lessons we've learnt. Well, really, I think in support of our ship owners and seafarers, there's been a number of lessons we've learnt on the way this year. We've experienced firsthand the crew repatriation crisis, which I think you've no doubt been talking about in the first half an hour of this session. Our attempts to review each case and support the needs of our seafarers have in some cases revealed a common truth. I think we've noticed in many ports that there's a clear disconnect between the maritime authorities and the border control authorities within the same country. Port state control efforts to sort of enforce to the letter of the law MLC and in particular seafarer contract durations are not always in tune with the reality of border controls that have been put in place, and often they disregard the travel plans that the ship owners or the manning agents have put in place. So well-planned crew change arrangements have been thrown into disarray, and we've even suffered detentions as a result. Despite being made aware of these best laid plans and to get them home, reviewing and accepting all the plans in place, we've in a number of cases issued short-term contract extensions to get them home. You mentioned working remotely. That's very much in tune with what we're doing at the moment. We understood the need to adapt to a new way of working very quickly, especially on our ships, and we've adopted remote inspection techniques. I think it first began when we were contacted by many of the class societies who operate as ROs for us on statutory surveys. But they were looking to carry out remote inspections, and we first witnessed a number of these surveys performed, and it became clear that remote inspection capabilities are already there. They're well advanced and able to deliver a survey, certainly to the requirements of our flag inspections. So for the time being, it's more port calls or better still at the anchorages where the crew have some time to manage the surveys. And we invested in inspection tools. We trained our surveyors, and we put work instructions in place to manage the process. And I would say our whole team has really embraced the change, which was driven primarily by COVID restrictions and the requirement we have as a flag to monitor our fleet. I'd say the clients are delighted with this as a service. It's less disruptive at port calls where there's, the usual 10 people turning up the gangway and asking to see the master with a need to have or demand the crew's time to accompany them around. So I think remote inspections have become a necessity for ship operators and for inspection authorities, and we're all struggling to meet schedules to meet this pandemic.
Okay, thanks for that, Toby. I'll come back to you in a moment. We've had a couple of questions online, and I'm not sure who to address this to, so I'm going to pick on somebody. Maybe Anwar. We've had a question that's come in that said, what is the panel's view on so-called no crew change clauses in charter parties? Should owners stand firm against charterers' demands and do the right thing, rather than bending to the will of the charterers who aren't prepared to share the cost? Now, I know you're in a slightly different position with KOTC, but would you like a general comment on that, Anwar?
Actually, we have two challenges in this regard with regard to the crew welfare, and we have insisted strongly on diverting vessels. Either we took the vessel off hire in certain situations in order to ensure the crew has been exceeded their contract period on board to be repatriated. I think that's a fair deal with the crew on board, And we have a lot of support from the industry regarding that. And even with the disputes of the cost of repatriations, getting the ship off hire, I think we pushed it in certain direction. We have to concern about the safety of the crew. If this crew does not go home, the consequences could be much, much higher. The crew are fatigued. This guy who's operating the vessel, I may get the ship one day of hire to carry out my crew change. Rather, she will be in somewhere as a wreck or will be on fire. So we better get these boys out and let's get the crew fresh on board to keep business going. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Matt, from a independent ship manager's perspective, without naming names?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and some practical experiences. We're seeing charterers coming to the table now. Some of you may know that there's a lot of ships anchored off China right now, waiting for discharging bulk cargoes. And some of our crew and the ships have been there since the summer. But now we're seeing charterers. It's a collective responsibility, Malcolm. And they see the benefits of having motivated crew that are fresh and focusing on safety and operational aspects. And now the charterers are, as I say, they're coming to the table and they're actually diverting the ships to nearer locations for crew changes. So as much as this is a personal experience, I'm seeing this now moving, and charterers now see that their responsibility is a shared one.
That's good to hear. So going back to your earlier comment about some real good signs of more cooperation and collaboration across the industry. Andy, you raised your hand. Is there a comment here?
Well, you may think odd because I know very little about the actual question around clauses in charter parties, but I did want to just make that connection about, here there is a lesson to be learned about the industry working together and calling out inappropriate or bad practices. And I think there is a risk, and I guess I'm the one safe to say it because perhaps I'm the neutral. There's a risk that 9 months from now, we go back to the bottom line being we need to make as much profit as we can. And we forget all the lessons that we're learning now about the realities for crews on board. As we become more remote, do the crews become even more isolated? How are we tackling that? I think there is a sense that together we can continue to improve this industry. There was a question earlier, I think, about is it still an attractive place? This could be a really attractive place to invest your career, your life, but it requires us all to work together and to speak out when we see things that are not right.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question has come in, and Rahul, I'd like to direct it to you because it's specifically regarding training. What are the resilient resources that Ocean Technologies Group have made available to seafarers? And is it right to ask the stress crew members to train more? So I think we're going to look at this issue, and I'm glad it's been raised, that how, at times of stress and anxiety, to actually then start investing in developing your personal development, everything else. Do the two things go together? Do you think it's training helps to solve this problem?
Well, it better, otherwise we're wasting our time. And certainly, obviously, we believe that it does. But of course, these things have to be done in the right way, and the tone is absolutely crucial. And particularly when it comes into those things, it's very imbued. It's got to be part of the company culture, and it's got to be seen as something that's being pushed from the top. It can't just be tick this box. Oh, we better put everybody through this training because then we show that we've done something. That's completely ineffectual, and it will have the effect that you mentioned there. So I think if I can unpick those things in the order that you raised them, the first and the foremost was the seafarer mental health and wellbeing resource that we that we made freely available. This is prior to forming the Ocean Technologies Group, and then subsequently allowing that to go out across all of the platforms that we have as a group, and that's a downloadable resource that everybody could use. And the real what I stress about that is that that's not just like a box ticking piece of e-learning. That was designed with facilitators' guides, understanding the value of bringing the crew together and to work through and to be discussing and sort of going over the issues and talking from a personal and reflecting on their own personal opinions. So that was our kind of, if you like, our immediate response to that. But as I said as well, there is more structure and more formality when you sort of look at a resilience program, because it's a multifaceted collection, which is walking you through all sorts of different aspects around sort of, awareness of what resilience is, but also sort of techniques to kind of keep things in perspective, to take personal care for yourself, looking at crisis, our default behaviors. So there's much more psychology to understand, and that makes it more suitable for a kind of a more formal one-to-one perhaps learning experience. One of the things that I've also seen from now the sort of collective of the group is that everybody's put these resources together. As I mentioned, the Shell Resilience Program is usually the anchor point for those. But there isn't a sort of, until recently, it's quite a fragmented space. There's lots of different people doing different things. There's a bit of overlap between some of the resources that are being produced by the different charities, with good reason. But I think that when we look, I'm quite interested in things like the standard that's been put together by the Marine Charities Group to try and find a kind of common standard of what should be involved in a program of learning around mental health and well-being training. So I think that the sort of, in my experience, the sort of groups that I'm involved in, industry groups like Intertanko and Intermanager, people generally sort of draw towards pooling resources around kind of coming up with common standards, because obviously it helps us to know that we're all sort of following a collective view of what best practice is. But I do think that then moving forward into the other point that you mentioned, which was around, is this kind of proving to be stressful, and what can we see? The data pattern, as you might expect, when sort of COVID hit, we did see a bit of a reduction in the amount of training that was happening on board the ships. Not a very big one, and a very big spike in terms of what was happening online, as you might expect. And that was clearly because people couldn't get to physical centres and so on. But the onboard trainings recovered very, very quickly. And what that tells me is that people are actually welcoming that sort of focus at a time when you're looking, when you're under a bit of strain. And I think that I see that the next 12 months, I think that pushing those buttons around, use this time to really think about how you can develop skills and progress your career is a really good message, because having a focus at a time like this, having a self-improvement goal, is a very, very good thing to distract you from some of the privations that you're suffering. So what I think, sorry, I didn't mean to, I'll go on forever.
Fabulous. Yeah. Toby, you raised your hand.
Yeah, well, I just on the subject of initiatives made and trainings on the crew welfare issue as a whole, the catalyst for us to take action was, sadly, more than crew repatriation. It was an apparent suicide on one of our vessels. And whilst we shared a growing concern for mental health awareness on ship, we really wanted to take it a step further and try and find a solution that would positively influence the lives of our seafarers. We started looking at the many charities and all the great initiatives and efforts that they're making, many of which are collaborative and extremely well delivered. But in many ways, we were wanting and looking for a solution that would tackle the issues, particularly of mental well-being, in a preventative rather than curative way. So much of the help available to seafarers is traditionally delivered by chaplaincy services at port calls, or seafarers seeking counsel on shore leave at the Seafarers Mission. But we wanted to deliver something to the seafarer that could significantly improve their time at sea and reach out to them whilst they're at sea. And combine that with the vast improvements in internet provision and Wi-Fi connectivity, and the fact that every seafarer these days has a mobile device in their cabin in their hand. So we set about working on developing a crew welfare app. And it's called Crew Matters. It's been developed in partnership with a Liverpool-based training company called Tap It Live. They're our partners, they're our app designers, and they are the key service providers for the app. We're just about ready to launch. It's going to be available for download and accessible to around 10,000 seafarers sailing on our ships. The key features of the app, its primary focus is to provide live interactive social activities at sea. And these range from fitness sessions, yoga, Zumba classes to mental well-being sessions hosted by trained clinical psychologists. Again, it's all streamed live and it's interactive to the mess rooms, or indeed privately and confidentially via the app to their cabins. Tap It Live, they've got studios set up in the UK and the Isle of Man, so they'll be streaming a full monthly agenda of interactive support sessions, which will be available to book and access through the app with reminders for accounting for time zones of where seafarers are for the sessions that they've selected and booked. The app provides many other features. It's all aimed at structured welfare support for the crew. They can log in, they can record hours of rest and work, and if they feel stressed or unwell, there's also a live SOS welfare button or function, if you like, that provides an immediate access to a confidential helpline and a chat box function that we've set up in connection with another partner, Is One, and they have specially trained team of counsellors 24/7 that they can talk to.
Okay.
So yeah, there's also functions available for the crew to connect to the chaplaincy services. We have Stella Maris on hand to arrange port chaplaincy meetings at forthcoming ports, and they can connect and arrange with a chaplain in advance of the next port call. And we provide a connection to the marine traffic app so they can check their progress to the next port. Okay. The main aim of this app and Tap It Live activities is to provide a more holistic approach to crew welfare and help perhaps the struggling seafarers' improvement in mind, body and spirit. And the features we've designed into it really should appeal and offer something to all seafarers, whether it's physical or educational activities or spiritual help they're looking for.
Okay, fine.
And in doing so, I think we sincerely hope it will alleviate some of the huge mental pressures that this pandemic has caused our crew throughout the long contracts they're having to suffer.
Okay, so it's another example.
Sorry, go ahead.
Malcolm, just going back to the question, is it right that we're asking these seafarers who are under stress to do more training? First of all, the crew just want to go home. You know, they're fatigued, they're worried about their families. They want to go home. So therefore, as I mentioned earlier, with proper engagement, we're actually giving them the tools to manage their lives on board the ships during this stressful period until they can go home. So with proper engagement, what Raoul and Toby has mentioned, you know, introducing this is not just another initiative or whatever. This is for their benefit, and with proper engagement for them to understand that we're trying to help them, you know, through this terrible situation, then we can see the benefits of this. So it was a very good question from the audience.
Great. Picking up on that, we've had a load of questions coming through the airwaves, and we've extended the session for a little bit longer. So, Matt, I'd like to address this next question to you, because this was one of the early questions that came in, which really caught my eye. So the question is, how attractive is it now for seafarers to continue their seafaring career? And perhaps importantly, also for young people to go to maritime schools? Because I've read some research to suggest that the hardest hit in terms of mental well-being have been the younger seafarers as opposed to the more mature guys working on board. So what's your view on the impact? And this is, you know, directly linked to sustainability, this question. Matt?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, our industry is not so attractive, and that's our collective responsibility. We're seeing continued piracy attacks in the Gulf of Guinea, week after week. We're seeing kidnappings. We're seeing environmental spills where the master is taken up down the gangway in handcuffs and whatever. This is sending out a bad image of our industry. Our industry does a fantastic job carrying the goods around the world safely and environmentally friendly, and will become even more environmentally friendlier going forward. Is our industry attractive? It wasn't pre-COVID. Now, during COVID, with our seafarers overdue by months, and some seafarers are spending their second Christmas on board the same ships. These guys, these ladies and gentlemen, and young men and young girls have an option. They'll go home to their families eventually, and they'll say, "Why bother?" So, as an industry, we need to make sure that, with retention in mind, we need to do everything that we can with hearts and minds to make sure that we support our seafarers throughout this process in order to retain them and bring them back when they're ready, rested, and ready to go. But it is a real challenge, Malcolm, and for our industry going forward with our hundreds of thousands of ships on the water, this is a people business, and we need trained, competent seafarers. For any young person coming in or thinking about going to sea, like I did many, many years ago, it was attractive, seeing the world, meeting new people. Now, ISPS and ISM and, the shorter port calls, where's the attractiveness? There is attractiveness, though, with careers, going through it with ambitions, going from a young officer or cadet to captain or chief engineer within 10 years. And this is a real collective responsibility as an industry. We need to be shouting from the rooftops about the good work that we're doing and the importance of our seafarers. So this is a great question, one that's not going to go away, but one that we really need to unite as an industry.
Yeah, I see several shows of hands there to come in there. So I'll go to Anwar next. Can you give a perspective on this question as well?
Yeah, just please, I'm just bitten here. Can you say it again? What the question, just to begin? Can you repeat the question for me, please, again?
Yeah, maybe focusing on today, given that everything has been happening, the challenges, the prolonged period on board ships of disruption, how easy is it going to attract the next generation of seafarers to come into the industry? Yeah.
Well, this is all about how we are looking into the pandemic, whether it's a temporary issue, which is hoping soon with the vaccines that will be overcome by 2021. So I believe based on how we approach it, to us, I'm sure today we reached to an understanding it's a temporary issue, which is hoping, keeping finger crossed, which will be overcome by end of next year. However, yes, it is a challenge to encourage a young generations to rejoin or to join the merchant navy in general. Again, what attractions giving, really, let's take it seriously. I joined the merchant navy almost 29 years ago. I could not see much changes in wages. I could not see much changes in welfare. I could not see attractive points happening in the industry. Or we notice a lot of seafarers, they taking it as only a temporary measure in their life, just for a certain period of time, just to build up some financial status or to gain a little bit knowledge to shift into the shore industry. Yes, it is a challenge, and I think the industry itself has to work on this area very really strictly, to how to create opportunities for the young generations how to encourage them by applying additional facilities, but I cannot see much change happened. Of course, well, to be in a permanent job till retirement, I cannot really see it taking place. I can see now that the retirement age, even for the seafarer, has been reduced from 65 to 60 to 50. Now, most seafarers, they wanted to quit sea by age of 45. They think they have done enough. They wanted to move to the shore job because it's no longer it's been an attractive job. I think that's made the area to be tackled by enhancing the wages, applying additional facilities, medical care, insurance, so to make it more attractive to the younger generation to join the industry. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Anwar. Andy, you raised your hand. Do you still want to come in on that question?
If that's okay, yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me there is a real opportunity here, and it's something that we as a collective industry, I like the collective that Matt uses quite a lot, have an opportunity to grasp. I'm very new into the industry. I'm about 2.5 years into the maritime sector, and I come from a world where I used to support the welfare needs of some of the highest profile people on the planet in the English Premier League, and now I support the welfare needs, it seems to me, of some of the most hidden people on the planet. And so it seems to me there's a global question of how do we ensure that seafarers are actually seen as the key workers that they are, and there's lots of talk about that in the press, but how do we as an industry maintain the momentum that says, during the pandemic, it's seafarers who've ensured you've got enough toilet or enough whatever else it is you've needed, and they have continued to work, and yet 9 months in we're still debating, are they seen as key workers, should they get special permissions to be repatriated and make crew changes? We've got to grasp that one. And then I think it's about, at local levels, how do we ensure the training is preparing seafarers for the 21st century, not still preparing seafarers for an industry that's long gone. And that would be something I've seen in some of the crews that I've sometimes met who are struggling around the Gulf.
Yeah.
It tends to be crews who are still operating and working in a way that's from 20 years ago. So how do we make sure that the training we're giving to people in the cadet schools is preparing them for this new exciting industry? My final thought on that is, in those 2 years, I've heard a lot about digitization and environmental sustainability. And sometimes I felt that we've forgotten that it's the people who still make this happen. And we've got to keep ourselves making sure we keep focusing on the people who make it happen.
Extremely good point. Thanks for that, Andy. Raul, you also, I think, wanted to come in on that point.
Yeah, it was. I mean, much of what I wanted to say has been said, but I think that I would just make 2 points. One is that we shouldn't underestimate the motivational power and the route to happiness of having a job that really matters and having a real sense of purpose. And this is what we're seeing with seafarers as key workers. I think it elevates that status to its rightful position in the eyes, and we are seeing movement finally at last. People beyond this industry are starting to understand that. So I think that that's something that we can really build on. But the second point is just taking up what Andy was saying there, is that we have an even bigger problem than we think we are, because there isn't really a standstill position. We're already having to think about, with the new ships that are coming in, with all this some of these new fuel type, new types of fuel, LNG and so forth, all these different developments, the digitalization, Internet of Things, all of this means we are looking for candidates that will really have options, because these are candidates that are able to be sort of autodidacts, that are be motivated self-learners who are able to problem solve. These are the skills that are also, we've said, great communicators, really good leaders, really good, empaths to be able to understand and connect with the human beings on board their ships. These are the people that everybody wants. So we have to decide, are we going to buy or are we going to build? If we're going to buy, then our economic model is going to be stretched. If we build and we get on the front foot and we start to think about the skills that we need now and start planning ahead, so that we are taking people on a career journey, and some companies are doing that already, and it's great to see. But it's a very mixed picture, and getting that real sort of feeling for what skills do we want? What's our succession planning? How do we build these stars of the future and keep them motivated? I think that's the crucial thing.
Fabulous point. So the change competitive landscape that our industry will face in the future. We've got about 15 minutes just under to run, and I can't ignore this killer question that's come in. So Matt, prepare yourself, brace yourself. The question is, and I've lost it now, can't we finally spell out that MLC 2006 is dead and literally a non-enforceable convention? As ship register countries want to collect fees for registration but take no responsibility, and ship owners take no action as they like those lower standards and fees. So I'll go to you first, Matt, and then maybe Toby, you could reflect on that as well afterwards. Okay, so MLC 2006 dead, Matt?
Okay, as you know, I speak openly. I welcomed MLC 2006 when it came in. I thought it would protect our seafarers, their rights, the standards on board the ships, the conditions. It would help us as managers and operators to be funded on time for seafarers' wages. Has it worked? Not really. So we need to do more. So therefore, as a collective responsibility again, we need to make sure MLC 2006 works. The concept of it is fully supported. Has it been delivered properly to realize the benefits of what it was intended? Not fully. And I agree with the comment made by the audience member. It's not, is it dead? It's not dead. It needs to be resurrected, and we need to make sure it works, because the concept of it, of supporting our seafarers and their conditions and rights, is fully fundamentally there, but it's not been implemented consistently, and we need to do that, Malcolm.
So it's certainly been stress tested. Toby, a view from a ship registrar on that one, please.
Yeah, well, I think the MLC has been ratified by nearly 100 countries at last count, and that represents 90+% of the world's fleet by gross tonnage. I think in many ways it's been a remarkable success. I've seen it written, it's called the fourth pillar of the maritime regulations behind SOLAS, MARPOL and STCW. The trouble with them MLC, it really only sets out a minimum standard in terms of crew protection, but it has no real mechanism for enhancement of their work-life balance. It draws a meaningful line in the sand, but it can just as readily be used as a baseline reference to work towards. And I think as such, it's not really appreciated by seafarers. I think we're seeing cases where seafarers are still on average 70 to 80 hours per week. And with modern technologies, we could easily reduce workloads to a much more manageable level. I think probably that's because the advances in technology will deliver cost savings, and more often that's considered as justification for reduced manning levels. And that leaves those that remain on board operating within the already bare minimum MLC hours of rest. So it's definitely an issue we need to address for the sake of seafarer, but I don't think necessarily MLC is dead. I think going back to a point Andy raised just quickly, the key part of this, the fundamental lesson we should have learned by now, and I think it came from the SARS outbreak in 2002, the key worker aspect, we really need to address that through a change and amendments in the International Maritime Conventions, principally MLC, because they never really considered pandemic situations. I think the inability of the conventions to designate seafarers as key workers is the root cause of all of this. And we need a common strategy to deal with this crisis, which includes all the authorities.
Okay. Andy, I can't resist the temptation of getting your views on this, particularly if you could also mention crew abandonment, because in essence, the stats I've seen, abandonment, not surprisingly in many respects, has increased this year. So your view, Andy, please.
Yeah, I'm as well as doing this seminar, I'm midway through a training course at the ITC with the ILO and IMO on MLC. And yesterday they were reporting that they expect to see a 50% increase in abandonments during 2020 on 2018 and 2019. And I smiled slightly wryly because, of course, I sit in a region where the great majority of countries have not ratified MLC, and therefore it has no impact. There's sometimes a desire to reach some of those standards, but environments go up, and I currently, and this is the reality for the very few I know, but I've currently got 5 crew who've been away from home for 40 months. They've been at anchor for 27 months, and they've not been paid for any of those 27 months. And that sadly is the minority which can tar the whole industry if we're not careful. So I think how you find a legislation that can be ratified and taken up by all of the nations, that's sort of beyond my level of authority and responsibility, I think. But I certainly see the other side of MLC, where nations haven't ratified and therefore are not necessarily implementing any of the standards.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Anwar, you wanted to come in there.
Yes, I totally agree here. You see, unless MLC ratified worldwide by every flag states and treated like any other conventions such as SOLAS or MARPOL, which is there you can say it's been implemented. You can see that it has different level of welfare between different nations based on ratified and non-ratified countries. And I said it will not all. It's only the time when it's been ratified similarly to MARPOL and SOLAS and other conventions, then you can say it will be enforced. We have to admit during the pandemic, we have to admit it's been seized. It's been totally seized, and although with the countries who ratified or the flag state who ratified it, they failed to implement it. They could not implement it. Okay, we understand the situation. It was unpredictable situation around about disembarking the seafarer, repatriation, medical care, medical health. Everybody was in a big dilemma here. They don't know whether to implement, and everybody knows that everything has been seized. But as I said, we will not see it worked or implemented properly until it's ratified by all the flag states here. Thank you.
Okay. Andy, a quick comment?
Well, it's just I wanted to offer some encouraging news, because the way that the UAE is getting around this is they are introducing new maritime legislation which will mirror many of the key standards elements of MLC without actually going through ratification. And there are various other political reasons why ratification won't happen. We haven't got time to go into that. But so they're encouraging signs in the region.
Okay. We are quite severely pushed for time. So what I'd like to do finally is to go around each panelist in turn, and perhaps you could share some brief thoughts about the future based on what we've learned and what we've experienced, something we never envisaged 9-10 months ago. Maybe start with you, Matt. Some thoughts of the future, and are you pessimistic, optimistic about the future?
I'm optimistic, Malcolm, but also concerned. And that having concern is good. It means that we need to work harder and be more vigilant. Over the last 9 months, we've had some real workarounds where we've developed during COVID, and that will drop back into the emergency toolkit, such as the remote audits and inspections. The virtual inspections, they do not fully replace the benefits of the boots on the ground inspections, etc. The innovations around crew documentation processing, that's here to stay. The pre-boarding formalities work in the favour of the seafarer and should be kept.
Right.
However, Malcolm, my closing comments, there is no doubt that this has changed our industry and how we do things. However, the needs of our seafarers and shore colleagues remain unchanged. This is a people business, and we need to work harder. We need to engage, listen. One of the questions that came in, which we didn't have time to talk about, was about what are we doing in V Group regarding mental well-being and the training of our colleagues. Well, we've engaged with ISWAN to train our 53 mental well-being champions across the group in order to support our seafarers and shore colleagues. This is not COVID related. This is beyond. Mental well-being was was here long before then. So let's focus on one another, look out for one another, create a culture within an organization where you can speak up. It's okay to say that you're not okay. And if we get there, Malcolm, we stand a chance of success.
That's a great thing. Raoul, could I ask for your sort of final thoughts on this and whether you're optimistic or pessimistic? I think, Matt, you're optimistic, but you are concerned. So, Raoul, your view, please.
Yeah, I think just reflecting on the last it feels like 12 months, doesn't it? Not quite. But reflecting over this whole period, I think that one of the things that I noticed very early on was that the advantage that early adopters had, people who had already started, experimenting with distance learning and kind of being digital, looking at digital processes and so on, really did find it much easier than the others. And I think that so for example, if you're already getting your course certification done online, it was just a simple switch to do more of that, So whereas others were sort of scrambling around and coming. What that meant, though, was that the benefit for me personally was we had many conversations with customers that hadn't really shared a lot of what was going on within their organization, and suddenly kind of looking to us much more as to be a kind of a consultant really to how they kind of solved some of those problems. And that has led to some really great conversations and some great ideas for what we can do positively around some of the things that we've talked about. So I think there is always good that comes out of these things. The other point that I would say is that to Matt's sort of caution. So I'm generally optimistic. One of the cautions that I have is that this has been a massive change for us as a planet and as our societies, and it may have various knock-ons as a result of that we can't yet foresee in terms of supply chains and how people kind of set up. So I think being sort of really kind of tuned in and really kind of watching the space and looking ahead is what's going to be really important now. Sort of planning ahead, planning for success is what I would advise.
More strategic. Thanks for that. Can I go to you, Toby, for some brief final comments and whether you're optimistic or pessimistic?
I would say optimistic, but I think the fundamental issue is designation of the seafarers as key workers if we're going to improve and learn our lessons. We simply can't revert to the pre-pandemic situation. We'll have learned nothing constructive from the sufferings of the last 9-10 months. And I think we'd be naive to think that this could never happen again.
Okay.
From our point of view as regulators, it needs to be done through amendments to the international conventions. And then the countries that have already ratified those conventions, the seafaring nations, will have no other option than to designate seafarers as key workers within their own national legislation, or they'll simply be held accountable for not meeting international obligations. So
okay.
As far as the regulations go, I think that is the mechanism for making a significant change to the hardship witnessed for seafarers right now.
Okay. Could I go, Andy, very briefly?
Very briefly, I'm a person of faith, and faith is to believe in spite of the evidence and will evidence change. And I am seeing the evidence change before me during the pandemic. So my hope is, I'm also a person of hope, is that will be sustained beyond the pandemic into the future.
Fabulous point. Thanks for that. And Anwar, finally, before I close the session.
Very optimistic, and I think
Great.
what we've been through, it's nothing would be worse than that, and we managed to overcome it.
Okay, fine. Well, thanks very much indeed, guys, and apologies to all of the people who'd sent in questions and we didn't get time to sort of address them. Thanks to Seatrade for setting this up. I think it's been a very insightful session. I've certainly learned a lot of some of the comments that are coming from the different stakeholders in the room. Good to see that there's generally a lot of optimism, but not surprised in many ways, because people who work in shipping are pretty resilient. They're pretty used to dealing with challenges. Okay, this one has been something that we've never, ever seen before. We've had sort of regional pandemics and issues, but this has been truly a game changer. And I think the overriding message is, as long as we learn, as long as some positives come out, then the industry will be in a better place than it was before. So thanks to all you panel members. Thanks for your contributions. Hopefully you've all got been able to use your time productively. And thanks to everybody who dialed in. Thank you very much. Goodbye.